Most people think Mount Everest is the deadliest mountain on earth. They are wrong. There's another mountain in Nepal which has a higher fatality rate in mountaineering history. On Everest, climbers fight altitude. Here, the climbers fight the mountain itself. One mistake and the mountain swallows you whole. This is Annapurna. Rising over northern Nepal stands Annapurna, a giant mountain of rock, snow and ice. Annapurna's name comes from the Hindu goddess of nourishment, a mountain meant to give a life. Yet among climbers, Annapurna became known for taking it away. Annapurna has one of the highest death rates of any 8,000-meter peak on Earth. Historically, Annapurna I has claimed about one life for every 3 successful summits. At its feet sits a village that have lived beneath these peaks for centuries. This is Ghandruk, a village that is gateway to the Annapurna region. Annapurna is part of the world's 8,000 mountain club. Where air is so thin, it kills you. Standing at 8,900 meters, Annapurna is world's 10th highest mountain. Even though it is world's 10th highest mountain, it is the most deadliest. The higher you climb, the more difficult it becomes for you. Oxygen level drops so low that every breath feels like you're suffocating. Fatigue sets in fast, muscles weaken, thinking becomes foggy. Climb too quickly, you can invite nausea, brain injuries, or even death. Annapurna death zone is different from the others. There are no long traffic bottlenecks, massive storms, or dramatic final mistakes. Most of the time, it happens without warning. The mountain collapses, the slope slides, and climber disappears. Unlike Everest and K2, Annapurna has fewer camps for climber to acclimatize, and that makes it more lethal. But why?
अन्नपूर्णा क्या है मूडी है कि इट इज लाइक अ मीन मिस्ट्रेस कि दिन में कम से कम 6 से 7 एवलांचेस तो देती है एंड स्पेशली व्हेन एवलांचेस कम ऑन अन्नपूर्णा इट्स लाइक मैट्रिक्स एंड मैट्रिक्स ऑफ टर्न. मतलब आप समझो 3-4 फुटबॉल फील्ड जितना बड़ा, फुल साइज फुटबॉल फील्ड जितना बड़ा, मतलब स्टेडियम जितना बड़ा किसी ने पलट दी है बाल्टी ऊपर से और वो आ रही है पहाड़ पे नीचे आपकी तरफ, धरती हिल रही है पूरी धक 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 धक. अब कहाँ भागोगे आप? ना दाएं जा सकते हो ना आप बाएं जा सकते हो, सिर्फ आइसैक्स नीचे गाड़ के बस से बैठ जाना होता है. You survive.
And वो कि आप डूब ना जाओ उसमें.
अगर रबल है तो भागो. You have to try and ride the wave because रबल में अगर आप अंदर आ गए तो ब्लेंडर बन जाते हो. तो हाथ पैर फिर इधर उधर मिलते हैं क्लाइंबर के, हाथ उधर निकल गया, गर्दन उधर है, टांग कहीं और मिल रही है, ऐसा हो जाता है. रबल आ गया उसमें तो घूमता हुआ आता है. पाउडर एवलांच है तो आपको अपने आप को कवर करना है, बचाना है. बाद में डिग आउट भी करना पड़ता है. कई बार बेरी हो जाते हैं तो विक्टिम डिटेक्टिंग रॉड्स होती है लंबी लंबी, इसमें डालते हैं, इसमें कपड़ा फंस के ऊपर आता है तो पता लगता है कि 20 मीटर नीचे इंसान है.
But that doesn't stop passionate climbers from climbing the mountain. Like Maurice Herzog, who became the first person to climb an 8,000 meter peak in year 1950. Before 1950, no human had ever stood on the top of the mountain higher than 8,000 meters. Maurice led a team of 5 French climbers with him to climb the Himalayas. The original goal was actually to climb Dhaulagiri, not Annapurna. But after weeks of exploration and route finding, the team concluded Dhaulagiri was too difficult with the knowledge and equipment they had, so they shifted their focus on Annapurna. They had no satellite maps, no GPS, no supplement oxygen, and very little knowledge of the Annapurna region on a mountain that had never been attempted before. After hours of climbing, the 2 Frenchmen reached the summit of Annapurna I, becoming the first humans in history to stand atop an 8,000 meter mountain. But ironically, the summit was the easy part. During the descent, the weather deteriorated. Herzog lost his gloves and became disorientated in fog, and severe frostbite set in. His team and Sherpa had to perform heroic rescue efforts to help get the climber off the mountain alive. Maurice survived, but lost all of his fingers and toes. This is one of the reasons Annapurna developed its reputation as a mountain where reaching the summit does not guarantee survival. Annapurna Base Camp sits at 4,130 meters. Hidden deep within a natural amphitheater of ice and stone. It's an enormous massif stretching more than 55 kilometers across the Himalayas. A maze of peaks, glaciers, and unstable slopes. Avalanches are a constant threat here. Snow and ice breaking loose high on the mountain are funneled directly toward the camps beneath. In 2012, one of the avalanches tore through the lower camps, killing 9 climbers and Sherpas in seconds. They were not even climbing, they were just resting, waiting for the weather window. The mountain gave them no warning. Most expeditions approach Annapurna from the north side, the so-called standard route. Not because it's safe, but because it's slightly less deadly than the south face. A near vertical wall of hanging ice and crumbling rock. But even the north route offers no guarantees. The climber begins with the long crevasses across an exposed glacier beneath towering seracs. These massive blocks of glacier ice, suspended overhead like ticking time bombs, they can collapse without warning, sending tons of ice crashing down the mountain. The real expedition begins at Camp 1, located at around 5,200 meters on a narrow shelf above the glacier. This is where climber starts feeling the effect of altitude. The air is thinner, every step requires more effort, and the terrain becomes increasingly difficult. But Camp 1 isn't dangerous because of where it's built. It is dangerous because of what's above it. The upper slopes of Annapurna are filled with unstable snow, ice and rocks. As temperature rises during the day, the slopes become even more active. Avalanches are a constant threat here. Climbers often hear distant rumbling echoing through the valley. In October 2013, Austrian mountaineer Christian Kuntner and his team were moving along the standard route when an avalanche swept through the slope they were crossing. There was no major storm, no unusual weather, just another avalanche on Annapurna. None of them survived. The most unsettling part is that this danger cannot be avoided. There is no alternate route. Every climber must pass beneath these slopes. The only option is to move forward and hope conditions remain stable. Higher up the mountain sits Camp 2. At approximately 5,900 meters, the ridge becomes narrower, the snow gets deeper, and the avalanche danger increases even further. This is where many expeditions decide to turn around, not because they are unprepared, but because they understand what's waiting above them. Unlike Everest and K2, Annapurna doesn't have one clearly defined danger zone. On K2, everyone fears the bottleneck. On Everest, climbers know the challenges they will face. But on Annapurna, almost every slope carries risk. The mountain gives you no warning signs. Even some of the world's best climbers have fallen victim to it. Like in 1991, legendary mountaineer Anatoly Bukreev successfully summited Annapurna. He was one of the most accomplished high-altitude climbers of his generation. But in 1997, during a winter expedition, an avalanche struck the high camp on Christmas Day. Bukreev was inside his tent when it happened. He never had a chance to escape, and his body was never recovered. His death highlights a harsh reality about Annapurna. Experience improves your chances, but it does not guarantee survival. Beyond Camp 2, the route enters a narrow gully of snow and ice. Climbers often describe it as a shooting gallery because anything that falls from above is funneled directly into this section. Rocks, ice, and avalanches all follows the same path. Conditions become more unstable. Then comes Camp 3. Camp 3 sits at approximately 6,500 meters on a narrow shelf, high on Annapurna upper face. Above Camp 3, the terrain becomes a mix of rock, ice, and deep snow. Large seracs hang overhead, while unstable cornices line the ridges. The snowpack is often weak and layered, meaning even a small disturbance can trigger a major avalanche. In 2008, Spanish mountaineer Iñaki Ochoa de Olea reached the summit of Annapurna. He had already climbed 12 of the world's 14 highest mountains and was considered one of the most experienced climbers of his generation. But during the descent, he collapsed from high-altitude pulmonary edema, a condition where fluids fill the lungs. Other climbers tried to rescue him, but at 7,400 meters, rescue is incredibly difficult. After several days on the mountain, Ochoa died. His death highlights a reality of Annapurna. Reaching the summit does not mean you're safe. Above Camp 3 lies Camp 4, the final stop before the summit. Most climbers leave Camp 4 around midnight. The goal is to reach the summit and get down before midday sun increases the risk of avalanches. But on Annapurna, timing doesn't guarantee safety. Avalanches can happen at night. Seracs can collapse without warning. Cornices can break even in a calm weather. The final route to Annapurna's 8,091 meter summit follows a steep, exposed ridge covered in deep snow and mixed terrain. On both sides are massive drop-offs. At this altitude, the lack of oxygen becomes a serious problem. Climbers move slowly, think less clearly, and get tired much faster. Above 7,000 meters lies the death zone, where the human body begins to deteriorate because there is not enough oxygen to sustain it for a long period. Every hour spent here increases the risk of serious illness, frostbite, and exhaustion. And even after reaching the summit, the climb is far from over. Many accidents on Annapurna happen during the descent. climbers are exhausted, low on oxygen, and forced to navigate the same avalanche-prone slopes they climbed on the way up. But despite modern equipment and better weather forecasting, Annapurna still has one of the highest fatality rate of any 8,000-meter mountain in the world. To understand why Annapurna remains one of the deadliest mountains on earth, you have to look beyond the climb itself and examine the two forces that define the mountain: avalanches and the bad weather. Avalanches are the single greatest threat on Annapurna. The mountain's massive networks of ridges, glaciers, and hanging ice cliffs create ideal conditions for snow and ice to break loose. Avalanches on Annapurna occur regularly throughout the climbing seasons, sometimes without even any obvious warning signs. Climbers can spend weeks carefully planning their ascent, only to be caught in a slide triggered hundreds of meters above them. One of the most chilling examples happened in 2013. The group of 13 climbers were making their way up the mountain, following the Dutch River instead of the standard route. They watched a massive avalanche thunder down the standard route. They all survived only because they took the other route by chance. Only by sheer luck. The weather is equally unforgiving. Annapurna sits directly in the path of powerful Himalayan weather that can transform the mountain within hours. Temperature regularly plunges far below minus 40 degrees Celsius. It increases the risk of frostbite and hypothermia. Storms can trap climbers high on the mountain for days, cutting them off from rescue and forcing them to make life or death decisions in some of the hardest conditions on earth. But the real danger is sudden brutal storms, like this 2014 Nepal snowstorm disaster. The Annapurna region was hit by an unexpected blizzard that dumped a massive amount of snow in a matter of hours. Trekkers on Annapurna circuit who were equipped only for a trek were caught off guard. The temperature and visibility dropped, and by the time rescue arrived, at least 43 people were dead, making it Nepal's worst trekking disaster in the history. These were just people hiking around it. Together, these two forces have turned Annapurna into a mountain with one of the highest fatality rates among all 8,000-meter peaks. Over the decades, the mountain has claimed the lives of some of the world's most experienced climbers. In 1970, British mountaineer Ian Clark was killed by falling seracs during an expedition on Annapurna's south face. 8 years later, member of the pioneering American women Himalayan expedition, Alison Chadwick and Vera Watson, lost their lives during the summit attempt. In 1980, their fellow climber Arlene Blum published a book about their journey called Annapurna, A Woman's Place, which goes on to become a classic mountaineering literature. In 1982, renowned British climber Alex McIntyre, one of the pioneers of lightweight alpine-style climbing, was killed by falling rock while descending the south face. Later, his heroics was published in a book called One Day as a Tiger by John Potter in September 2014. The mountain continued to take lives in decades that followed. In 2011, legendary South Korean mountaineer Park Young-seuk and 2 teammates disappeared during their descent and were never found. Most recently, in 2023, Irish climber Noel Hanna, a 10-time Everest summiter and one of the most accomplished mountaineers of his generation, died while descending from Annapurna's summit. These climbers were not beginners. They were among the most skilled and experienced mountaineers in the world. Yet Annapurna claimed them all. Annapurna does not just punish mistakes. Sometimes, even when climbers do everything right, the mountain still wins. So if Annapurna is this dangerous, why do people keep coming back? Maybe because mountains are not climbed with logic, They are climbed with passion, curiosity, and ambition. For some climbers, Annapurna represents the ultimate challenge. Not because it's the highest mountain on earth, but because it may be the most unforgiving. On Annapurna, nothing is guaranteed. Every summit has to be earned, and every successful descent feels like a victory. Everest may be the world's most famous mountain, but fame isn't the same thing as danger. For decades, Annapurna has humbled some of the greatest climbers in history. It has tested world-class mountaineers, challenged elite expeditions, and reminded everyone who steps onto its slope that experience alone is not enough. Because on Annapurna, the mountain does not care who you are. And in the end, it always has the final say.